And we're back for part 2. So, when we look at the superluminal priming, if the participant connects the nature and the purpose of the prime to the subsequent task, they can make a correction and it won't show any effects, right? So, you say, well, then why would you use superluminal priming when you have subliminal available, which people shouldn't be able to correct for at all? Well, here's the rub. Superluminal priming is usually more powerful in its effects. Subliminal priming, wherever it is, here it is usually less powerful in its effects. So, I want to show you a little priming setup that I did for my dissertation. My basic theory was that emotion exists both consciously and non-consciously. And it's a long story in how I got to this point. It's not something I had ever intended to study, but it is what I ended up doing about 1.5 years, 2 years worth of dissertation research on. The idea was I want to bring people into the laboratory and I want to prime them into an emotional state, a non-conscious emotional state of which they will not be aware, and therefore they will not be able to correct for the priming manipulation. That is the role of the stimuli in their perception. So ultimately, they're going to see that stick figure cartoon, and I'm going to ask them, hey, what is person A feeling towards person B? The whole idea is if I've primed the participant to be angry, then they should project that anger onto the ambiguous target. You ever heard of the Rorschach Inkblot test? That is, psychologists used to show people inkblots, which is just that, an inkblot, and they say, what do you see here? And the idea was there's nothing to see there other than inkblots. But when someone tells you a story, what they're telling you is a non-consciously kind of repressed story that they're now going to let out on this ambiguous target. So that was kind of what's behind it. So how was this done? Well, we're going to prime people in this particular experiment using images. So they're going to be presented with 3 associated emotional images, and they're going to come into the laboratory. They're going to be asked to stare at the computer screen. They were told it's a reaction time study, so they were going to be able to press a button every time they saw a flash on the screen. The flash was really the presentation of an image, the presentation of what's called a mask to wipe the image off their retina so that it only travels as far as the visual thalamus. This is the non-conscious processing of visual material, is the visual thalamus. Straight down to the amygdala, quick, fast, emotional responding. But the slower route then proceeds from the visual thalamus back to the visual cortex, where conscious processing takes place. Dual process model. Quick, non-conscious processing, slower conscious processing. Both occur. This is one of the great things about our brain. We have the ability to do both. So let's see how the experiment worked. Now the timing on this is critical, and I can't do it on this computer. You have to use a computer in a laboratory that's set up with a program called DirectRT, which precisely down to the millisecond controls the length of the presentations. This isn't capable of doing that. But the participant is then going to sit there. They're going to see a total of about 20 presentations of images, about 6, 6, and 7, 7, 6. So here we go. Ready? Stare at the white screen. Press a button when you see the flash. Did you get it? All right, so let's go back through it, and here's what happens. I'm standing at the screen about anywhere from 8 seconds to 30 seconds. You're going to stare at the screen, and then it presents the image. Now, what do you think this picture is trying to prime in the participant? What emotional state should this picture evoke? If you said fear, I would tend to agree with you. At least that was my intent, that this would then. But now notice, if I present this image, and we presented this image for 15 milliseconds, that's all, 15 milliseconds, you could still process it consciously because of your iconic memory. That is, it's still flowing down the pipeline. And that's why it needs to be followed by this mask. So what happens is this hits the retina, and then this hits the retina, and it blasts the previous image the hell away. So this image can get as far as the visual thalamus, but then is interrupted before it can be consciously processed at the visual cortex, right? The pattern mask is presented 3 times longer, that is 50 milliseconds, and this wipes the image off. So when I ask people at the end of the experiment, I say, hey, those flashes on the screen, can you describe them for me? Because we debrief our participants, right? They say, well, you know, it looked like broken glass, or it looked like a bunch of triangles or some such. And then I knew we were good to go. Okay? And then the next one. So there's going to be 20 of these presentations, just the 3 images presented over X number of times, as I told you previously. So ready? Boom. Scary? Maybe so. And then the pattern mask. Next one. Notice we use images that are naturally designed to evoke fear in the average human being. Now, what do I expect? The people in the fear condition, the people who see these images, then I expect them, when they watch the cartoon, after that, I say, okay, so we're done with that. Now I have a new experiment for you. I'd like you to look at this cartoon. And then they watch a cartoon, which goes 30 seconds, and then the end frame is the 2 figures standing there, and I go, what's person A feeling towards person B? And what I'm hoping for is people say, I don't know. And I say, yeah, but if you had to guess, what would you say? And I expect people in the fear condition to say, I don't know why, but I think the person's afraid. And if they're in the anger condition, then I would expect them to say, I don't know, but I think they're angry, right? Okay, mixed results on that. So, but this is the nice thing about a dissertation. It doesn't have to work. It just has to be well done. Okay, so... And God bless Marilyn for helping me through all of that. She was the bomb for a dissertation advisor. So, cognitive behavioral output in response to a stimuli. There was a stimuli. I was looking for a certain cognitive output, right? Sometimes we look for behavioral output. The whole package is far more complex than anyone would imagine, and I think this is why so many of us had so much fun with these automaticity studies that kind of Tanya inspired us to do. The beginning, the antecedents take place outside of awareness for the most part, so we can't really track them down. Antecedents is a fancy word for the stuff that happens before. And in this case, antecedents can be a whole host of things. It can be your memory, your personal experience, your current motivational state, your current emotional state, what you've been thinking about just now. All these antecedents often are operating outside awareness. When I was growing up, they said, Mark, you only use 10% of your brain. And what they meant was, only 10% of your brain is devoted to conscious processing. And now what we see, though, is people in neuroscience are maybe telling us, you know, maybe only 2% of the brain is devoted to conscious processing. The other 88% is non-conscious. We are largely non-conscious beings. So, further behavioral effects, just as an example, can affect academic performance. Right, so she, Patinsky, and Ambati have demonstrated this. We're going to talk about stereotype threat down the road. And if we prime Asian women to think of their Asianness, they did very well on math tests. But if we primed Asian women to think in terms of their gender, then they didn't do as well on the math tests. Think about the competing stereotypes. Asians are excellent in math, okay? Women, hey, you know, don't worry your pretty little head about those numbers is kind of the stereotype, right? So depending on which concept, self-concept was primed at a given time, be it Asian or be it woman, then it affected their math test performance in that regard. Now note, they were primed outside their awareness, and that's why this worked, right? It can affect physical behavior, and this is one of the most amazing. Those fill in the word tasks, put the word puzzles that I showed you. In this case, the experimental condition, in fact, used words like, with blanks in them, Florida, Cadillac, gray. That was to prime elderly as a concept. Those people who are primed with the elderly concept, outside their awareness, right? They don't understand the impact. Then after they completed the word puzzles, they were asked to take the word puzzles to the elevator and go down a floor to the other office to turn them in. What they did was they timed the walking speed from the office to the elevator, and they found that people who were primed with elderly walked more slowly to the elevator. These are college students, right? The neutral condition, they walked more quickly. Okay? It can affect interactions. So in this case, participants had to interact with another participant, and if the other participant, who was not a participant, was a confederate, someone working for the experiment pretending to be a participant, they the participant was allowed to make the person eat hot sauce if the Confederate pissed them off. And what they found is, as people walked into the lab, half the people who walked into the lab walked by this pistol on a table, and the experimenter made a deal about it. Say, oh my God, I'm sorry, I didn't mean for you to see that. You know, the other experimenter who was running studies before must have left that there. That's bullshit. Like all social psychology experiments probably have some level of deception. The participants who walked past the pistol, right, and then later interacted with the participant made the Confederate eat more hot sauce, measured in teaspoons of hot sauce, right? Notice, how do you operationalize aggression in the laboratory? Well, you can ask someone to dose out hot sauce. The more aggressive someone's feeling, the more hot sauce they make the other person eat. More on operationalization for one of your assignments. So it can affect interactions, and this was especially Horowitz, who was a big student of aggression. And that'd be it for automatic processes. Now, I know the chapter in your book had a lot more than this. I just wanted to focus in on a couple elements of it. So thanks a lot, and see you on the flip side.